Hello and good morning, friends. This is Amy Register. I'm live here with my mama, Teresa Register, the home health mentor. And we are hoping that if you are at a time and place where you're building your home health agency and you don't have a lot of support, that we can be that support for you, that we can be a friend in the industry. My mom's been doing this for 30 plus years. She's even spent some time as a surveyor. And so she's seen the ins and the outs. And today we're going to talk about right aids and a little play on the chain that provides you your prescriptions and occasionally ice cream and such. But Mama, tell us about home health care aides today and why this is kind of a sticky subject that people should be paying attention to.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I wanted to spend some time talking about home health aid services because it is another common area where agencies do get quite a few citations. It's also an area that has a lot of specific standards, and if you have citations in a number of those, it's very possible that you could get a condition level deficiency, which we all understand is not a good thing. So today I wanted to briefly talk about level 1 and a specific level 2 standard that I think we really need to pay attention to. In the future, hopefully next week or maybe in 2 weeks, depending on how my schedule works out next week, I'd like to spend some more time on additional standards within this condition. But today I'll just cover the first level 1 standards and then focus a little bit more on the issue of competencies. So before I get too far into this, I wanted to also remind everyone again that you always have to know your state regulations as well as the CMS regulations, your accrediting standards, and your own policies and procedures, because the surveyor is going to hold you to the most stringent of those standards. Today, I'm only going to be talking specifically about the CMS standards because there's a lot of variety from state to state on how they categorize their home health aides, or sometimes they're just called CNAs. So it varies from state to state. So you really have to be aware of what your state requires.
Okay, so we're going to give a good overview today, and everyone has got to just double check because they might have something a little bit more stringent that they need to be looking at.
Right. Depending on whether they do only skilled services or if they do skilled services and personal care attendants, there's different classifications of aid level personnel. So everyone needs to really know what their state requires. So again, today I'm going to be focusing on what CMS requires.
All right, teach us some stuff.
Any state requiring aid education, training, competency evaluations, or certification, supervision, any part of this standard, the agency itself is responsible for making sure they meet the requirements. So any federal requirement that's more stringent than a corresponding state requirement will take precedence over a more lenient state requirement. So I think that's clear.
Yeah.
All right. So here are the level 1 regulations that have to do with home health aides. It's CFR 48480 G1 or GTAG 798. And that standard has to do with home health aide assignments and duties. The thing to remember about this standard is that home health aides must be assigned to a specific patient by a qualified professional, meaning a registered nurse or a therapist has to have evaluated the patient's needs for personal care assistance, and they must fall within the practice guidelines of the state and Medicare, and they must be covered under the physician ordered plan of care. So the home health aide is an extension of either nursing or therapy or both. So when the patient is evaluated and the professional makes a plan of care for that patient, the home health aide has to be specifically assigned to that patient based on the patient needs and the home health aide's skill level. The other
Can you explain why is this a standard? What have you seen that goes against this, or why has this been a muddy water?
well, I'd say the main reason is there's a list of specific skills that home health aides must be checked off on as far as their competency. But sometimes patients have additional needs that are not on that competency checklist. For example, if a patient has to be transferred from a bed to a wheelchair using a Hoyer lift, for example, the aide may or may not have ever used a Hoyer lift. The therapist or the nurse that assesses the patient may see that that patient has a Hoyer lift in the home, but maybe the aide or some of the aides have not experienced, using a Hoyer lift.
Mhm.
So if an aide would be assigned to that patient, they would get into the home and say, I don't know how to do this. So the RN or the therapist that's assessing the patient's needs and coming up with a plan of care will look at that patient specifically and then need to double check and make sure that the aide they're assigning has all the skills required to take care of that particular patient. So it has to be
Okay.
patient specific.
All right, that makes sense.
Okay.
So when you see that an aide has been mismatched for his or her skills and services to a patient, then you know that this is standard has been violated. It's not a good thing for anybody.
Yes, and one of the ways the surveyor is likely to pick up on that is if there's a complaint or there's an accident of some kind, there's a fall, an incident, and then the aide is looked at carefully. And if that aide has not had the appropriate training to care for that particular type of patient, then that would not only be probably a citation, it could be an immediate jeopardy situation, which we really want to avoid. So it's really important for the RN or the therapist that's making out the plan of care to be sure that every skill that that patient's going to need has been taught and supervised and checked off as competent for the home health aide that's being assigned. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. Just a quick little side story. One of the organizations that I worked with called and said, we have a lawsuit and we need you to look at this chart and tell us if we should settle or if we should present our case and try to get out of this lawsuit. And so when I looked at the chart, the patient had fallen and the family was upset, of course. And so the first thing I looked at was, has this aide been checked off on competency for transferring patients? And looked at the notes and looked at what was documented as far as safety in the home, whether or not there were throw rugs that might have been in the way, something that would have been, cluttering the area so the aide couldn't perform properly. It's one of those things where you really get down to the nitty gritty if you're in a lawsuit situation And that's when these things get really scrutinized. That's when the home health agency really has to pull out their documentation and say, this aide was trained in appropriate transfers. These are this is the skill level, this is the level of experience this aide has had, and it can really save you if you have good documentation of competency and training. So yeah, it's really important that you pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That kind of keeps you on your toes as an agency owner, making sure that, of course, you want to provide excellent care, but making sure your bases are covered in case of
Right,
something like that. And it's unfortunate, like, obviously, no aide goes to work hoping to drop a patient. But yeah,
right,
when things go wrong and it's sad, a lot of people are lashing out or looking to blame outside themselves. And, as long as
right.
we're here on earth, those things are going to happen. But thank you, home health heroes, for training your aides so that that is minimized.
Right. It's not the whole story, but it is a big part of defending the organization. If you've done everything the right way, it will show. And yeah, accidents still will happen, incidents, happen.
Mhm.
But you can at least show that you weren't negligent in your training and, checking off the person's competencies.
Mhm.
So the other level 1 requirement is for supervisory visits by either a therapist or RN at least every 14 days. And I wanted to make people aware that currently there's a proposed change to this rule, not that it would allow for an extension of that time period, but during the COVID situation, CMS has allowed some remote evaluation of, supervision. And so there is a proposal to make that a permanent thing on occasion. And I want to stress two things. One, it's only a proposed rule, so it is not in effect currently. But secondly, that it would not be a standard practice. It would be available for things like a snow emergency or, some kind of an unusual situation that comes up.
Okay,
But
so there'd
that
have
is,
to be, if these conditions are in effect, then this would be implemented.
yes. And so I'm expecting there to be some pretty heavy duty conversations about what percent of the visits could that, happen, or under what circumstances would it be okay. It's another one of those areas that I'm a little bit concerned about because there's always gray areas. And if it's not well defined, it's going to be hard for surveyors and for home health agencies to know how to comply with it. So if agencies get a chance to have input on this proposed rule, they really should respond and send in their comments. Hopefully, we'll get some clarity on that in the future.
Mhm.
So those are the two level 1 standards under this condition. It is not uncommon for surveyors to look at the level 2 standards under this condition. And the first one, and the one that I really wanted to focus on, is 48480C 1, 2, and 3. So it's on competency evaluations.
Let's get it.
Some of the agencies that I have personally cited on this standard have been cited because either the competencies were done at the time of hire but not done annually, or they've been done on hire but done late annually. They also sometimes may have been done but not documented properly. And then sometimes they are not being done by a qualified RN or therapist. And when I say qualified, that is a little bit of a gray area, but your accrediting organization will sometimes define that in a specific way. So if you are a CHAP accredited agency, you may want to double check with your regional director at CHAP and ask how is this being defined right now, because normally you have to have an RN with at least 2 years of experience, one of which is in home health or a related kind of thing like hospice or private duty. So the person that is doing the checkoff of someone's competencies can't be a new grad, a new RN, graduate. So you really need to know that the person is qualified to fill that role.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have seen agencies that are struggling with staffing have just a new RN go out and check people off on competencies, and that's really not acceptable. It's, in my opinion, it's not acceptable under CMS either, because of the regulations around the training and competency programs that are spelled out. But there is a little bit of a question about whether or not it can just be an RN or it has to be an RN with 2 years of nursing experience, and one of which is in home health. So pay attention to that particular issue. Anyway, there's lots of possible reasons for citations related to competency evaluations. You really have to make sure that you've covered all of the content that's required and that it's documented well, and that documentation really must include a sign-off by the employee and whoever did the competency evaluation. And again, it has to be done at the time of hire and annually. And annually normally means within 12 months of their last one. So keep that in mind when you're planning your nurses' schedules.
Sometimes when you say these things, I feel like, please, no one, no offense, this is not real, dramatized for effect. I feel like there's a bunch of agencies running around where people are like, y'all competent? Thumbs up if you are, and everyone's like, yeah, we passed it. We did it a couple years ago. And they're like, all right, carry on.
Yeah, it's, I hate to think that that's really what people are doing. I suppose it's a possibility, but if you're gonna take the time to document it, take the time to do it.
Yeah,
So
goodness.
Don't lie. If you get caught, that would be a major problem.
Yeah,
And
I think I know what's really going on. It's you test somebody on something and then they're actually using that skill, hopefully rightly, throughout the year.
right.
And then it's just time to double check that you're really that close to the line. That's why you're doing it. It's not that most of these people are far off. At least that's what my imagination tells me, is that they're really not far off, but they might have been picked up a weird habit along the way and just needs that mid-course correction.
Well, keep in mind that when a professional is doing a supervisory visit at the patient's home every 2 weeks, normally they will pick up on a problem with the aide's skill level because the family or the patient would complain about something. So that's when the therapist or nurse should just go to the home and reassess that aide's skill level. They're also agencies are also required to do at least one annual on-site with that person present providing care. And at that time, it's good if the professional, either the nurse or the therapist, actually has the home health aide do some skill that carries some potential for an incident. In other words, make sure that aide knows how to transfer a patient safely. Make sure that you observe at least the setup of the patient being prepared for a shower, a bed bath, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that annual on-site is part of this overall competency assessment, and it has to be done annually while you're observing the care being done. So how the competency evaluation is done is also important, and that is also how it's determined that you will document that the evaluation was done. Some parts of the competency evaluation can be in writing. It can be a test on paper, but there are specific skills that have to be done either on a person or now with the recommitment by CMS to allow a pseudo patient or mannequin that has interactive capabilities. Home health aides can be assessed not necessarily on a real patient in some situations. So it's important that you differentiate in the documentation what skills were measured on paper, what was measured on a real patient, and what was on a pseudo patient or mannequin in a lab setting. So CMS wants to know that agencies aren't just asking questions about blood pressure on a test. They want to know that that person has been observed taking vital signs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to document how the aide is being checked off on their competency skills.
Awesome. All right, if you're just joining us, we're talking about some heavily cited standards concerning home health aides. And just stick with us here for a few more minutes. If you've got any questions, you can let us know at the end of Teresa's preparations.
Yes. So I've seen the pendulum swing both ways over the years. When I first started in the industry in the mid-'80s, it was required that all the competencies had to be done on a live person. You couldn't have a mannequin, for example. Then it went to you can have a pseudo patient, you can have a mannequin, some things can be checked off in a lab, other things had to be done on a patient. So I think it was 2017, some people again raised a concern that these skills really needed to be done on a live patient, meaning an agency's actual admitted patient. Well, there was a lot of backlash because realistically, it would be very difficult for you to find enough patients to do a bed bath, do a shampoo in a sink, do a shampoo in the bed. There's, all these things that they have to be checked off on, but patients aren't really likely to want to let you do those things unless they actually need it. And not all patients do need it. So there was a lot of backlash from the industry. So CMS has agreed to, once again, allow certain skills to be performed either on a patient or a pseudo patient or on a mannequin that allows for some interaction. I have not seen those mannequins personally. I've not seen an agency that has any mannequins that have that kind of interaction capability.
I sure would like to.
I know.
can we please find somebody with one and like interview the mannequin and see how responsive they are?
There
Like it
may
would be
be
so cool.
there may be some training programs where they've purchased mannequins for that, kind of situation, but I have not seen any in any home health agencies. So let me just put it that way.
Yeah, they
Um,
could send that mannequin to my hairdresser as well so that that lady could learn how hot is too hot. That mannequin could be like, "Ouch, you're burning me." And then when I get there, the water temperature will be perfect. I like this idea.
so to make it clearer what CMS means by pseudo patient, they have actually defined that. And a pseudo patient is a person trained to participate in a role play situation or a computer based mannequin device. The pseudo patient must be capable of responding to and interacting with the home health aide trainee and must demonstrate the general characteristics of the primary patient population served by the agency in key areas such as age, frailty, functional status, and cognitive status. So you can't just pick anybody. You actually might get your grandma to consent, or you may find another person who is disabled that would allow you to use them as a pseudo patient. But
I
it
see
can't
a
be,
weird casting call in Hollywood's future.
but it can't be one of your coworkers that is perfectly, mobile and competent.
Think of
So,
the service to the homeless this could provide. Like, I'm being 100% serious, but
yeah,
imagine,
that's an
like,
idea.
do you need a hair washing? You know? Like,
Do
this
you
would be
need a bath?
so helpful. Yes, this would be so helpful. Would you like someone to lovingly bathe you? I've got just the day for you in mind, a spa day for you.
Hmm. So they've also defined simulation. And according to CMS, simulation means a training and assessment technique that mimics the reality of the home care environment, including distractions and constraints that you would actually see in the real world in a fully interactive fashion in order to teach and assess the aide's skill level and to check their decision making and critical thinking ability. So it's, again, this is sort of a compromise between what some of the proponents of let's make sure this is done on real life patients
Mhm.
versus the home health agencies that said, hey, that's not realistic. So this is sort of a meeting in the middle of the road. It's like, yes, you can use a pseudo patient, but they have to mimic or be similar to what a real patient would be like. And then secondly, the setting must be not just a laboratory setting that's, got all of the things right within reach, and you don't have to think or take care of any distractions like the dog jumping up on the bed or,
Mhm.
things that really happen in the home. So it's sort of a compromise.
This would be a really fun training simulator. I think you
You
should
could
build a little.
build a
Yeah,
room.
yeah.
Maybe we could franchise that.
Oh, yeah. Could be mobile, whatever.
Oh, that's an idea.
Yeah, I love
Um,
it.
so um, another rule that is has been in question or in discussion was, what if the supervising professional goes to the home and identifies a deficiency in the aide's competency? Maybe they've gone to observe the patient in, getting a bed bath, and the aide turns out to not be competent. Uh, Maybe washing the wrong areas of the body at the wrong time. Maybe not keeping the patient covered, whatever. The professional has to retrain the aide and then reevaluate after the retraining. It was suggested that if an aide is found to be deficient in one skill area, the agency would have to retrain all of the competency skills. And again, the home health agencies said that is not necessary. We don't need to, reinvent the wheel. So again, CMS has said, okay, we will agree to that. So you only have to retrain in whatever deficient areas the aide was found, to not be skilled at.
Yeah, that makes way more sense.
However, there's a little caveat. If the aide is found to be deficient in 2 or more areas, then you really are expected to retrain and recompetency them in all of the areas. And again, that's a gray area. It may or may not, you may or may not see that in real life situations in agencies, but technically, if the aide is deficient in 2 or more areas, you really owe it to your agency and to the aide to retrain and then check them off on all of their skills again. And if it were me, I would not wait a year to go and do another on-site. I would do it, in another month or two, and just see if the aide has developed some better skills. You might see this in a person who has recently completed their competency training and they're just a little nervous or just don't have their routine down. So give them a little time, but then reevaluate. And if they do a good job, praise them. Give them a good, pat on the back, because it can be really scary to be performing these things in front of a supervisor. So that was all I wanted to cover today, but I also wanted to say that I'm going to be traveling next week, so I may or may not be able to keep this schedule, but whenever we go through this again, I am planning to continue on and talking. I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the other standards that fall under this condition.
Okay, so for more aides coming soon.
Yes.
More aide services. Okay. So we'll have a part 2 next time we meet, whether it's next week or down the road.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. I have a private question here before we go. Just about the order of the bath. Out of curiosity, is it possible to wash the wrong body parts at the wrong time?
Yes, it is. In other words, if you think about how you do your own bath, you would not wash your bottom and then use that cloth to wash your face, right? So
I would not, no.
So the rule of thumb is start from the head to the toe, and then the really dirty parts last.
All right. Keep
Does that make sense?
booty away from the eyeballs, you pink eyes. Got it.
It's not a good idea for a number of reasons. So yeah, so keep that in mind.
Clean to dirty and top to bottom seems like a good
way to think of it.
Order of service. Yeah. The cleanest parts to the dirtiest parts. And if you get a chance, the top parts to the bottom parts. All right. Well, that was fun. Thanks so much, Mama. I hope you guys got some value from this, and we look forward to giving you part 2 next time. Whenever we meet, this is Amy and Teresa Registered, the Home Health Mentor, wishing you a really happy weekend, and we'll see you sometime real soon.